Hello, and welcome back to The Lair. Today's video is a general guide on world building and the pitfalls that you may not realise that you're falling into. World building is an exciting and rewarding part of creating a story, but it can also be a challenging one. We'll be exploring some of the most common concerns and challenges that people encounter when world building, and what we can do to overcome them. Make sure you guys like the video if you appreciate this kind of content as we approach 2,000 subscribers on the channel. Thanks so much to all of you guys who've supported the channel so far. One of the most common mistakes that people make when world building is thinking too big too soon. It's easy to get caught up in the grand scale of your world and forget about the smaller details that make it feel more real. Instead, start small and build from there. Consider what your characters need to know from the get-go and what is relevant to the story that you're trying to tell. This approach will allow you to avoid getting lost in the details and kind of losing sight of what really matters, which is building your world. Detail is very important with world building, and you often see with newer creators that their invention is missing a lot of character because the scale is just so big. For me, I'm a dungeon master, and my world building is specialised in storytelling. My focus is to develop a living, breathing world that my players can get lost in. My focus begins with the starting settlement, and then slowly building the region around it, everything from terrain to the ecosystem, and even the story plots. I've spoken to countless people who've told me that they love world building, but can't seem to stick at it for too long. It's easy to look at many of the successful projects out there created by your favourite world builders and feel disappointed in comparison when viewing your own project. You can't feel discouraged. Remember that their projects weren't built in a day. It took time, a lot of effort, and a huge amount of creativity to string everything together. Whilst that may seem overwhelming to consider, especially when you're at the bottom of the mountain, it does feel great once you've made it to the top. Another pitfall that people fall into is making their world too realistic and basing it off the norms and values of the world that we live in currently, the modern world. While it's important to create a world that feels believable and relatable in a way, it's equally important to remember that you're creating a story, not a documentary. If you're including magic in your world, for example, it's essential to consider how these elements would change your culture and society. Would it be accepted, feared, or regulated? By thinking about this, you can create a world that's both realistic and engaging. You see countless worlds where magic seems interwoven, but yet culturally nothing really changes. The town guards are still, just the town guards, and they don't really have much on them for dealing with spellcasters. In my world, the kingdom has an order of inquisitors who keep spellcasters in check. If any wizards are found using their magic illegally in towns, they will be hunted down. Additionally, most lords and important families have court mages who represent them in all things magic, but also protect them against other spellcasters who have ill intentions. Consistency is another crucial aspect of world building. Your world should have a consistent internal logic that governs how everything works, from the laws of physics to the behaviour of its inhabitants. If elements of your world don't fit together coherently, it can feel jarring and disrupt the immersion of those who interact with your world. Keep in mind that every action has consequences, and every element of your world should have a reason for existing, however small that may be. And this may feel a bit jarring, but a lot of it comes down to common sense. Follow what makes sense to you, and when things get difficult, come up with an interesting solution. If you really want to include a river of golden water in your campaign, it should be worth considering why this phenomena happens, and represent that to the people who need it. Perhaps the god of light blessed the river long ago, and it's believed to keep the people who live nearby safe. A good story, however crude, can really lead your audience in a variety of directions and get them thinking about the greater plot at hand. Finally, it's essential to consider and remember who your audience is when world building. Your world should be created with the audience in mind. Think about what they want to see, what they find interesting, and what will keep them engaged in the world. Failing to think about your audience can lead to a world that at least they find unengaging, unrelatable, or simply uninteresting. As a dungeon master, this is not necessarily as important, as it's likely your going to run a world for players who, well, have a similar interest or view on what makes a good world. But it's not a bad point to consider nonetheless, considering what your players in particular enjoy from your world, and developing that further can be a sure way of keeping people interested and hooked. If your players love vampires and want to play hunters, take a page out of Dracula, Van Helsing, or the Count Strahd, right? Originality is important, but it's not bad to take inspiration from various concepts and make it into your own great story. And I think that's really it for our video on world building pitfalls. By considering these points, you can create a world that is immersive, engaging, and satisfying for your audience. Remember to start small, balance realism and fantasy, be consistent, and keep your audience in mind. How has your experience been actually as a world builder? Did you find this information useful? What other ideas do you have about world building that could help people? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. It's been a good one, guys. I'll see you next time on Loki's Lair. Until then.